Alright, response video to Matt, and it's mostly going to be about physics. So, if that doesn't turn you on, then go find something else to do this time. Click on some other kind of video. Matt does try to make physics into a subject relevant to biological life, and so he's talking about entropy and is creative, which is kind of, a bogus concept. And even the concept of entropy, this whole idea of the heat in a system, or the energy and equilibrium, and the idea that things tend to become equalized. And these are certain tendencies or rules of the behavior of matter. But they're always done in a only partially acknowledging what's taking place. So it's almost like analyzing biology without analyzing the chemistry underlying the biology, or analyzing chemistry without analyzing the underlying physics that is chemistry. So it's all one science, okay, and it's all physics. And so my problem with these discussions is that thermodynamics doesn't have much to do with any part of the real world, just because the real world has matter in forms, and depending on what form the matter is in, there can't be equilibrium. So yes, equilibrium works in the sense that you're going to achieve some kind of thermodynamic equilibrium if you have all the same billiard balls that you're bouncing around. But if you're bouncing around billiard balls that aren't equalized, then you'll have a different kind of noise created, because the big ones will get smaller and the smaller ones will get bigger. And so you won't be able to achieve the same kind of equilibrium, depending on how the tendency of the evolution of the matter itself. And so then you get into this whole cosmic argument, because the cosmos is what's creating all this. The macro stuff is creating the micro stuff kind of idea. So the big scale universe is creating these fundamental elements. And so I go back to Einstein's E equals mc squared, right? Because that's where the energy really is. So if you have an atom in a stable condition, thermodynamically it's weak, because it's not producing anything we call energy. It's not expelling anything except whatever its radioactive component might be, which would be tiny. For a stable atom, it's got a half-life of like a zillion gazillion years. Thermodynamically, it's not producing energy. It's not doing anything. There's no interaction it's having. There's nothing itself that is producing anything. So it seems cold, but it's not cold. It's full of E equals mc squared. It's full of heat. It's full of energy. It just isn't releasing it. And so that's kind of where I see use in the conversation. So just to get rid of the how this is relevant to human beings part, yes, from our perspective, we're doomed. Okay, mechanically the system is not going to support these ideal conditions that we exist in now. They're not stable conditions. They're not conditions the universe produces and maintains. It doesn't create little isolated unradioactive spots for little things to grow and all this kind of crap. It's not some safe playpen. As from the universe's perspective, the sun's going to evolve and change as it thermodynamically dies, and that will change the atmosphere in the solar system, and there's all these other impediments to our maintaining our existence, and at any moment some other thermodynamic event in the universe can create a beam of radiation that just disintegrates us. So there's nothing to say there's nothing in the universe that says this is a maintainable or sustainable condition. And I suppose part of what you're implying is that is life part of the mechanism of the universe. So you have the opinion that somehow you have evidence that there's any indication that there is some probability of life existing in the rest of the universe, yet you can't produce any evidence. 4 billion years of life evolving on Earth, and only one cell ever accomplished the task one time, even though it's covered in zombie body parts. We can't make one with all our king's horses and all our king's men. We can't create such a thing. yet you presume this is chemistry that happens in the universe. And I just think that's a kind of a bold presumption, when everywhere we look, the evidence says exactly the opposite, that nope, not there, not there, not there, not there. It's not there. There's no indication of it existing. There's no indication that it is created as a function of matter in the universe, that replicating is something it does routinely. It's highly complex chemistry, and highly complex chemistry can only take place in very small sections of the universe that are tolerable, that provide conditions that make that even possible. So anyway, I don't see any real use to this. This is theoretical, let's understand the mechanics of the universe conversation, not conversation really relevant to the human condition or the biological condition on Earth. It's a one-time infestation, and it has a definite half-life. It has a termination. It will be driven extinct, all of it, every bit of it will be, all the complexity will be reduced, because that's what the universe does. Whether the universe, like I said, it creates in stars complex elements, heavier elements, and at the same time it destroys other aspects of complexity and turns it back into photons. And that's what the universe is doing. So my argument to you would be, thermodynamically, the big issue is what happens to all the photons the universe is radiating into the space beyond the universe. Right there, you're saying you're losing some mass over time. You're losing it. It's going out there somewhere. And until there's a theory that says you can pull that stuff back, you're dead. You're going to die eventually. You're going to run out of photons eventually. From somewhere further away from the universe is glowing with photon emissions. And where are they going? How are they going to be captured? How are they going to be brought back home? So my argument would be some kind of super black hole could do it. So maybe that's the mechanism. Maybe that's what black holes do. They compress matter back into the hole they popped out of. I can give you theories. That's just, one of my theories is I think the solid one, is that all matter is moving at the speed of light. So all the real matter, the energy, the E thing, the little bits of it, the quanta, is all moving at the speed of light. So everything that moves is not really moving. The things it's made up of are moving. So it's everything that's its constituent parts are moving at the speed of light, and all you do is rearrange it so now it moves in a direction at the speed of light, but now it's not moving at the speed of light because not all of the matter is going in one direction. Not all of the photons caught up in the matter is moving in the same direction, but the net total of movement is in one direction. So if you have a bunch of orbits around nuclei, the argument would sort of be that if you added up all the orbits, if you added up all the directions they're all moving at one time, to move a baseball, let's say, all you're really doing is saying more photons go that way than go that way. And that's why the ball goes that way, is because more photons are going that way than are going that way. Sort of. That's the simplistic explanation, is that when you take the total of the eccentric orbits, the eccentricities of the orbits is in a direction instead of not in a direction. So you're just changing the position, the where the domino is going to flip. So if the domino was sitting in a state in space and it had the choice, it can flip this way, or it can flip that way, it can flip this way, it can flip that way. And forward depth even. So 6 ways. It has 6 choices of movement. And which way it flips will be decided by this thing we're discussing, is what arranges it. So what captures photons in matter in the first place, in atoms. And so we call these nuclear forces. Well, they're not, I would claim, they're not really forces, just as gravity is not really a force. All gravity is doing is changing the direction. It's changing the arrangement of matter that comes in contact with the Earth. And it's changing its arrangement in the sense that it is now arranged so the matter inside, so the photons now inside that matter that the Earth has contact with through gravity is now changed. So there's now a net production of this this movement, more photons are moving in the direction of the Earth than are moving in away from the Earth, and therefore the thing falls towards the Earth. So there's no force applied, there's no energy introduced, there's just a change in the decision of which way a piece of quanta is going to flip. Will it flip left, right, forward, back, in, out? And so these are its choices, and all the Earth does is say, instead of going from here to there, I'm telling you to go from here to here. And so there's no force applied, there's no mechanism of force, there's just a change in the arrangement which now changes the direction of the quanta. Yeah. And so it's all directional quanta. It's all the direction of quanta that decides our arrangement. But the movement of quanta is static, in that it must go the speed of light. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable explanation. So the whole electromagnetic spectrum is just quanta arranged in these things we call photons. And so if we say photons aren't discrete things, then let's say they're made of quanta, let's say 1,000,000 quanta, and let's say an electron is 1,000,000,000 quanta. So I would argue that all photons are in some sense linear, and that the wavelength, the length of them, will decide how much energy they can hold for a duration of time. But they're all just quanta. They're just discrete bits held going in the same direction. So if it's like a school of fish all going in the same way, it will now behave as if it was a single animal of singular mass, just like a group of people could charge something and they would have the force of an elephant. So they're not an elephant, but they have the force of an elephant because now they're all moving in the same direction. So all of their mass is now oriented in one direction. So that's the rule for photons. It's all the quanta moving all the same way. That's a photon. So it goes the speed of light. An electron would just be photons that aren't moving all in the same direction. So they might have a circular, they might be connected to each other in some other pattern, or they might be moving in eccentric patterns, and therefore the eccentricity slows them down. So how much spin they have, or rotation in their movement forward, how many times they go left instead of just going forward, kind of thing. And that would define an electron. So electrons could be variant in speed, almost approaching the speed of a photon, but if they did hit the speed of light, they would essentially be turning into a photon. What we describe as a photon, or a radio wave. So what else do I want to add to this? So yeah, I mean, understanding this physics thing is, I mean, it is tricky that they have words to define things that aren't they aren't well developed. And I'd say that thermodynamics is underdeveloped in the sense that it's an application of, they're applying it only to the energy that is in common human perspective available, which is the energy produced routinely by sources that's released. And most of that's in this form of chemical energy. And that's not the energy that really exists in the universe. Most of the energy is, well, it's in loose forms of, atomic nuclei and all this other stuff, but the point is that the difference between this loose energy called a photon when it's released and this captured energy, there's no difference between the energy that's loose and the energy that's captured. It's just that the energy that's captured is not going to be able to do anything because it's captured. And when it's captured in an atom, it's inert. It has no teeth. It's not on the road anymore. It's not traveling anymore. It's lost its capacity to do distance. And so it's almost lost its capacity to be part of time and all this other stuff, but I don't want to get into all that. But that's the feature of it, is that now distance isn't created anymore because it's trapped inside of an atom, which is kind of significant. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. I just don't see any point in trying to apply these rules of physics of the universe, tying it to some kind of word like creative. I mean, it's just kind of bogus. We know where our creativity came from, and the creativity is in creating errors. I mean, entropy creates errors, you might say, or mutations, or distortions, or perversions. It rearranges stuff. It doesn't necessarily do it in some way that's creative. Yeah. That's another word for it. I mean, it's not chaos. Obviously, we are filtered, we're forced into a form through natural selection, because there are a list of demands for survival, and you have to fit those demands to survive, and that's the rule. So we're automatically becoming filtered as biological organisms. But that's not a creative force, strictly speaking. It's kind of almost the opposite. It's a kind of a Borging force. It's kind of a force, that is funneling and narrowing and constraining. It's a force that demands. It's not really creative. It's not free. So let's take away the element of freedom in the word creative. Then what do you have? If you don't have freedom in your creativity, then what is your creativity? Right? It's not chaos, but it sounds like a jail to me. Anyway. Yes, that's probably enough. Yeah, that's probably enough. It's an interesting subject. But, like I said, you really can't apply it to the human condition. We know where we came from. We know our origins. And I know you want to make them into something. But you only have a brain because it's a scheming tool. That's why you have one. You don't have one to think you're an artist, or to think you're creating, or to think you're doing something. That's not what it's there for. It's there for you to scheme survival. And yeah, you can apply it to these other things. But the bottom line is you're still scheming. And you're scheming solutions to problems that the universe doesn't need you to keep creating. Yeah, that's the truth of it. Anyway, enough.